Today we're talking about two of the most renowned shooters on the Amiga.
This is Pixelated Audio, episode 42, featuring Hybris and Battle Squadron. It's so good.
Oh man, I can't believe how awesome the track is.
Yeah.
Anyway, welcome back to the bi-weekly video game music and retro gaming podcast, Pixelated Audio. I'm James, and this is Brian.
How's it going? Today we're going to be playing music and talking about two different shooters on the Amiga, Hybris and Battle Squadron.
The track that brought us in was the intro music to Battle Squadron, composed by Ron Klaren.
Awesome track, man. This is one of my favorite all-time songs, I think, on the Amiga.
Yeah.
It's just, this whole soundtrack is, and it's, I don't know, it's like this perfect blend of like arpeggio and tremolo, and it gets my blood just like boiling. It's so awesome.
I mean, you can't really say much more than it's Amiga, man. It's so good. Like, it's got such great sounds. There's just synth for days, and it's got such a great, like, intense up-tempo beat that just really gets you excited. I mean, that's one of the reasons why you and I love shooters, is the music is just so fast-paced and just really gets you pumped.
Yeah, and then you combine it with the awesome sound of the Amiga, and it's just like a win-win combo. But no, we've been talking about doing this game for quite a while because it's such a well-known game in the Amiga library. Probably one of the best shooters on the system. And so it was kind of just obvious that we were going to hit this eventually. And the music is actually, more than the game itself, the music is what sold us on making sure we did this episode. So
yeah, I mean, this is a game that maybe some people haven't played, but a lot of people have heard the music for.
Right. And, and depending on where you are in the world, too, this may be a game that is, a definite childhood memory. So, I know there's a lot of Europeans who this is like the game for them. This is the shooter that defined, the Amiga. So I think that being able to kind of talk about this game and the music is going to be a lot of fun.
Right. But since Battle Squadron is actually the second game in the series, or more like a distant cousin to another Capcom shooter called Hybris, we're actually going to take a step back and talk about Hybris first.
So Hybris is a single-player vertical shooter that came out exclusively on the Amiga in 1988. And I think it kind of defines shooters on the Amiga because it didn't come out for anything else. And so this is the only way that you can play it. And it was developed by Capcom and published by Discovery Software.
And Capcom is an Amiga dev studio founded in 1987 by Martin Peterson and Torben Larsen. And they actually met while working on a game called The Vikings for the Amstrad. Peterson is a little bit more of the code and game design side of things, whereas Larsen handles a lot more of the graphics.
Yeah, for both Hybris, which was their first official title, and Battle Squadron. And they're still around today. They're still making games. Yeah,
in 2011, they actually released this really cool game that was actually the first two-player split-screen iOS game for the iPad called Battle Squadron 1. Have you ever played this?
No, I didn't really even know about it until we were looking this up. And I'm like, oh man, I should have probably checked this out. But
yeah, I mean, from what I understand, it's like I said, it's two-player split screen, so you each get one half of the iPad and you hold the end of it, and you get to play together, or I guess maybe against each other. So I think that actually could be kind of fun.
If you set it down on like a table or something, I could see. But if me and you were like holding on to it, like one of us would just end up with the iPad, and the other person would just be like, "What?"
Well, that might be one of the cool things that makes it kind of difficult and fun.
Yeah, it probably can't be more than $5 or something like that. Anyways, why don't we get into our first track from Hybris? This is the title music, so let's check that out. We'll be right back.
You just heard the incredibly amazing Hybris title music composed by Paul van der Valk.
I like how you incredibly amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I just can't get over it.
It's a wild track, dude. Oh, yeah, no. Other than sounding like it stole a bunch of sound effects from like Star Trek, it was just such a rush of adrenaline right off the bat while the game is loading up. All you see is the title screen at this point, and you haven't even started playing yet, and it's already high energy, fast pace, and just everything about this track is really cool.
Yeah, I mean, even though we're seeing a different composer than Battle Squadron, we can really see that like Peterson and Larson have this idea of what they want for music for their games, and it's just so awesome, like so good, so fast-paced, like you said, really driving. I think this track was very heroic and dangerous at the same time, while it kind of like made you want to tap your toes. And like you said, this game is still loading, so you're like ready to go, like like a dog at the dog races or whatever. Like you're just like ready to, as soon as the gates go down, you just want to take off and play this game. So I mean, it's just super exciting. I love when title music does that. It just gets you so pumped, and as soon as the game starts, it's just like, oh my god, I can't believe I'm playing now.
The volume goes up and goes down. It's kind of like that crescendo decrescendo of the arpeggios. You get this really like kind of flying through space feel. I don't know. I don't even know. I mean, that's my thought, but that makes sense,
I can totally see that. Like like your boosters are powering up, and then you take off, and then it's like, oh no, I'm jumping out of light speed or something.
Yeah. No, that's how it sounds to me, and it captures that shooter kind of space feel. I think really well. Awesome track, excellent composer. Very underappreciated composer, I think, but it's a very good track. Computers in general back then just had a lot of soul. Like the demo scene, hardware hacks, programming, all the. I think there was different crowds. There was like the TI-99 guys, the Commodore 64 guys, and Atari guys, but everybody was really passionate about their system. They were really into what they were designing, what they were making, and you could tell this small group, this small team that did this game, and with the help of the composer, we're able to really put something in that just feels very, I guess it's like soul food for video game, like retro game players.
Right.
It's that, it has that feeling to me, and I think that this soundtrack really embodies that.
Well, for me, I think that these systems, they were, these older systems, a lot of really small companies were being developed with just a few people, and I think that really gave them the opportunity to really try something different that may fail. And I think when a company gets big enough, they have so many people they have to kind of watch out for.
There's so much overhead, right?
Yeah, and you kind of have to, take fewer risks. Whereas, like, I mean, this was two guys, and they could, this was their first game, so you kind of want to pour everything into it. And I mean, this game was really cool and did really well. So the music was just insane, and I think that was the feeling for a lot of these older systems like this. Was there were these people coming straight out of demos where they were just doing this for fun and just trying to get someone's attention, and then they're like, hey, your music is awesome, let's do this. And it was just so many talented people that were pushing what the systems were, generally weren't intended to do. So I think that's why there's so much great music on all those, like you said, like the C64, Atari, and the Amiga.
Right. Anyways, let's talk about Hybris a little bit, because it's a unique game. It's, it is just your average shooter, but there is some cool things about it that I think make the game special for the Amiga. And if you're gonna play an Amiga game, this is definitely one to try out. It's a single-player top-down vertical shooter that can be either played with a joystick or a mouse.
This game takes place in the year 2461, where an Earth colony is lost on an alien planet called Jerica.
Jerica?
Yeah, I don't know.
Jurica.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Jerica.
There you go.
Anyway, after the communication is lost with the colony, a scout ship is sent out on a rescue mission. And what's really cool is at the beginning of the game, you can pick between two different pilots. You have JP Maverick and Kay Lovett.
Kay Goose.
Yeah, Maverick and Goose.
Anyways, Paul Vandervalk, he's kind of underappreciated, like I mentioned earlier. And it's because he doesn't have a whole lot of video game music titles under his belt.
Which blows my mind.
Yeah, he's a Dutch software programmer and a composer, so he's done a lot of other stuff along like the software side.
Yeah, and like you said, Hybris is his only game music credit, but he does have game credits for coding and level design for the Poing series, which Poing is...
I'm sorry, just you saying that sounds so funny.
It's a funny title. So Poing is an Amiga game that's kind of a Pong clone, which I guess you can kind of get the name is even like a name clone. But anyway, you get a paddle on the left side of the screen that has a little ball that bounces back and forth. But instead of like an opponent, you are breaking blocks that are actually arranged in, like pixelated landscape art.
So is it kind of like Alleyway?
Yeah, but except for you're going, I'm guessing, left to right instead of up.
So is it side-scrolling?
I believe so. That's what it looks like from the images. I didn't look up like a playthrough or anything for it, but it actually looks really cool. Like it's all these like pixelated landscapes, and I guess there are some like abstract designs, but most of them are landscapes, and you just kind of bounce back and forth and break the blocks of the landscape and move forward.
That sounds pretty rad.
Yeah, I think this would actually be kind of neat on like the 3DS or something like that. Some little simple little app to play.
Yeah, but aside from Hybris, he's actually done quite a lot outside of game audio, like software, demo tunes, but he's most famous, I think, in my personal opinion, is most famous for the Turbo Imploder software, which is an executable file compressor. And I knew about these tunes way before I knew about Hybris. And it was just so cool to kind of see the connection. I was like, oh man, like that's the same composer that did Hybris or that did the Imploder music. And, you know, we're never going to get a chance to play this. Can I go ahead and play it?
Oh, yeah. I've never heard this.
Yeah, just like the first 30 seconds or something. think that was a little more than 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Sorry, lied.
Totally worth it, though. I mean, to think that track is not used in a game, and even the name Imploder, that's like such a cool name for a game anyway. So
yeah. We had some really cool lyrics, some karaoke session with that right now. Might have to make an EP later on.
Yeah.
Anyways, but I love that track, and it was funny because I had to go back. I looked on YouTube because I was curious about. I was like, man, this sounds so familiar. Yeah. And I was like, I know this song, and so I went back and looked at like this old hard drive that I had just a ton of stuff on, and I found the actual mod file. I think it was a conversion mod or something, but it was like, oh my god, that's what it is. Like, I think dated like 1994 on my computer, so
nice.
It had been out for a little while, but no, it was a cool track. I'm glad we got to play. We're never gonna ever play, software music.
I mean, and we're never going to talk about this composer again since he doesn't have any other game music credits. And I can't believe, like, I'd never have heard of that track, and that was so awesome.
This track, the Imploder track, was actually done in the Medley sound editor, but Hybris was done in Future Player, or he did all of his music in Future Player, which is a synth music format that he created in 1988, and this was the predecessor of the Medley sound editor, which is the Imploder music. So you can kind of tell he kind of updated his tool set, and he was able to make like this kind of music.
Yeah, I mean, you could see he was very comfortable working in the Amiga to make sound.
Right, and the software he created was incredibly difficult to use. Like, from what I read and stuff, it was so hard to use that the only person that actually could use it, I mean, he opened it up, anybody could use it.
Yeah.
The only person who actually wrote music for it was Paul van der Valk.
Yeah.
Because it was that difficult to use.
Anyway, let's get back into some actual game music.
Okay.
We have some in-game Hybris music coming at you next.
That was the in-game music from Hybris, composed by Paul van der Valk.
Oh man, like we try not to swear on this podcast, but that guitar was nuts. Man, like, oh my god.
No, the bass, that really raunchy, like, I don't know, something crazy with the offset or something. It just makes your whole body like shake. It's really cool. I love that the bass in this is so deep, and like it's almost like you can hear the waveform. Like you can actually like hear it and see it like floating kind of through your eyes as you're listening. It's crazy, and it goes all the way through. And awesome drum kit. Just a cool song.
Oh yeah, I mean, and there's like this part where it almost turns into like an underwater sound. And then I was like, wow, that is really cool. And then what saves you from that is that guitar.
Yeah.
And then eventually there's that crazy drum breakdown at the end of the song. It's just like it's like some guy just like jamming away on the guitar or like on the drums. And I mean, every instrument in this, I can see it as like someone in a band. Right. Like the guitar, I can see some guy like, shaking it and like, strumming away. And then like some guy just on the drums just like drumming away, like everyone just watching him. And
it sounds so cool too, because in that drum solo at the end there, at first you're thinking like, oh, this is the same kind of pattern, but if you listen really closely, there's a lot of like new like hi-hats and reverse cymbals and stuff thrown in that kind of feather their way in through the end. It's like a 30-second drum solo. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I mean, they did a really good job with a lot of subtle things in this. It had a lot of great parts. There was a lot of variety that, I mean, for a long level or so, this could feel really cool.
Yeah, now there is one gripe that I have about this music, and I know you're thinking the same thing. It's when you're playing the game.
Yeah.
Because this is in-game music. When you're playing the game and you're shooting your weapon, it basically cuts out the channel of the guitar.
Right.
So you do not hear that.
Yeah.
And so really the only time you can hear this music is when you're playing the game is to not shoot anything.
Yeah. Pretty much just continue flying. I mean, in shooters, they're known for lots of action, and so I mean, a lot of the time you're hearing that channel turned off, and you're hearing a little bit of a drum beat in the background
and the bass and stuff. Yeah,
yeah. But like for the sound effects, you got the bullets being shot and the other ships being blown up and stuff like that. And it's like when I was playing, it made me want to just avoid everything and just fly around on the screen. Right. But I mean, this game is not easy.
It's not. Let's talk about the graphics a little bit, because this is a very early game. In 1988, the graphics were so well done that I think it's aged very well. I think it looks really pretty today, and it's still a very, I guess if you like shooters, like this is got to be right up your alley, because it gets all of the aspects, all of the positive points, all the main things that people like in shooters and I like in shooters, and it kind of puts those all together in this really sweet little package.
Yeah, for an early shooter, it's got a lot going on for it. I mean, the look of the game is very clean.
Nice big sprites.
Yeah, big sprites, lots of really cool environmental stuff that you're flying over top of. It's not too busy. It's a little bit on the simpler side, which is nice with, so then you don't get a lot of sprites lost in the background and stuff like that, or the ground. Right. And I mean, it's a really good looking game. I would have never expected, had I not gotten into the Amiga, that an Amiga game would look like this.
Yeah,
I would have expected it to be much more like very rudimentary, like very simple, super simple sprites and stuff. But this was very cool. Lots of shines and shadows and roundness to a lot of the stuff, which you wouldn't expect.
Even that title screen is so cool.
Oh yeah, the title screen is super cool.
Art's so well done. And a lot of shooters, we expect to see like the 3 or the 4:3 ratio, where it's like more of like a vertical monitor. But this having a normal, your standard 3x4 display, you think it would be limiting. You wouldn't be able to see as much screen real estate because you have so much on the sides, but it actually does a really good job of keeping time to kind of look around, even though it is difficult. And I think that the placement of the enemies and stuff is very well kind of paced out throughout the level. Yeah,
and they have some really cool stuff. Like some of the enemies on the grounds have like shields. So you're shooting them and they're kind of behind like shields, which I thought, wow, that's really cool. I have no way of killing that guy. So I just have to always keep an eye out for him because he's going to shoot at me as I go past him too.
Well, it's kind of neat because with those shields, even though you can't damage them, you can you can fly just past them and shoot the guys inside. It's the only way to do it, but you have to time it out because they may have a bullet like right on you.
Super dangerous.
Yeah. The game, it's kind of almost like a one-hit kill, right? You get hit once, you're out. It's pretty punishing, but there are some really cool aspects about your ship and about the upgrades.
Yeah, you actually want to elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah. So basically, you get different like power-ups. Like this is like any other like R-type kind of radius type thing. You get power-ups throughout the game, and your ship is composed of like kind of a main center vessel, and then you have two little mini parts on the side that you can control. And if you, on a joystick, on the Amiga joystick, if you quickly circle around without touching any buttons, your ships will kind of disengage. The little mini parts will disengage and maybe go behind you, or depending on the power-ups you have, will do different things.
Yeah, change their formation.
Right, but it's really crazy because the more power-ups you get, the bulkier your ship gets. You at the end, you may have, and I actually had to watch a playthrough for this because I could not get past like level 3, I think.
Yeah.
And but you get pretty far, and your ship will bulk out, and it'll be huge. It'll be like, I don't know, like 8 times the size of the original ship, and does crazy damage. And it's really cool because you can get power-ups that will shoot forwards and backwards. And I think that the whole power-up aspect is pretty cool to the game. It's a lot like a lot of other shooters, but it works well. And this is a very early game, so kind of fun to see all these other nuances from like Japanese game developers and stuff kind of put into this package.
Right.
But yeah, like I was saying, the game aged really well, and it plays great. It looks amazing for an OCS game. That can't be said for all games, but if it was coded and developed correctly, it still works today. And I think that even for a game from 1988, like we're saying, there's a lot more depth than you would expect. I think it kind of defines the Amiga.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these shooter games, they're very cool, and they do hold up very well as long as they're done properly. I mean, the graphics, and it's more about the gameplay as opposed to anything. It could have very limited graphics, but as long as it's fun to play, it's going to be awesome. But this game has great graphics too.
Yeah, and for an OCS game, I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, could you actually explain what OCS is?
Yeah, so basically there's 3 generations of chipsets on the Amiga platform. The OCS started out on the A1000, the Amiga 1000, in 1985. And then there was the enhanced chipset, and that came out in 1990, and then the advanced graphics architecture in 1992. And each one was kind of like a new... without getting too into detail on it, each one was kind of like a new iteration of graphics and processing and stuff that it could handle. But the original that came out in 1985 is what this software ran on. And so that very old technology could really do some, I mean, if it was put in the right hands, it could do some really amazing things. And I think that that's so awesome. But let's go ahead and get into our last track from Hybris. This is In-Game Music 2, composed by Paul van der Valk.
That was Hybris In-Game 2, composed by Paul van der Valk.
It's a pretty cool track. The first thing that I was thinking during the song was that sounds a lot like Jurassic Park. Yeah, like the Game Boy version of Jurassic Park.
Yeah, I can see that a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know. It was a cool track. It's short. It's I don't know where this plays in the game.
Yeah,
not sure. It might be like a bonus area or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty cool. The beginning of the track sounds very much in fitting with the other tracks that we played from this game.
Right.
And then it kind of goes off on its own, which we see with Amiga a lot, and I think it's always kind of cool. Sometimes they maybe not do it as well, but I thought this was a pretty cool instance.
Yeah, it's a cool track, and like there's a lot. I mean, classic stuff, the ARPs and stuff, and different modulations, and it was a cool track. Not anything that's like jumps out and catches you like some of the other stuff, but it was a fun one to play.
Right. Now, we've actually talked about the Amiga a little bit in some past episodes, like expansion packs, and I know in our Double Dragon episode we talked about it, but
Utopia and stuff.
Yeah, and we kind of just touched on it a little bit. We never really dove in really deep, so I think this might be a good opportunity to really dive into how the Amiga sound hardware works.
Yeah, so the Amiga sound hardware is named, it's basically a chip inside the Amiga called the Paula chip. And so kind of going back to the original chipset, when we were talking about earlier for a second, there's basically 3 parts. There's the Agnes, which is kind of like the gatekeeper. It handles all the access to the RAM from the processor and the other chips and stuff as well. There's the Denise, which is the main video or graphics processor. And then there's the Paula, and that's the audio or sound chip.
Which in its simplest form is, digital to analog converter.
Right. But after hearing some of the stuff we played on the show, you know that Paula is a pretty capable piece of hardware.
Right.
And there's 4 channels, and we've talked about that before. There's 4 channels of 8-bit PCM samples or 8-bit audio.
Yeah, 2 for the left and 2 for the right.
That was kind of like a hardware mixed restriction. It was done all by hardware, so it's nothing that the composers really could change. But it's a reason for the amazing stereo that we have in a lot of Amiga games, a lot of Amiga soundtracks. You also have 2-channel 8-bit audio modulated by 6-bit volume, and that's called amplitude modulation. You can also do a chain of modulation. So the first channel modulates the second channel, and the second channel modulates the third, and so on. And
which is how FM synth basically works.
Exactly. And so the Amiga can also do FM. So you could have one channel modulated by a chain of the other 3.
Yeah, and it actually gets over my head at this point. So.
Yeah, no, me too. It's really hard and gets really complex. And not a lot of composers actually use the full capabilities of the Amiga hardware. Right. And on top of that, it could do both the amplitude modulation and the frequency modulation at the same time. So it's just crazy.
Yeah, and there's some instruments and samples that you can get, or you can actually create your own stuff in software.
Yeah, and they were called from memory, just like any other soundtracker program, which sounds really great, but
eats up the system a bit.
Exactly. It really is kind of expensive. And a lot of systems will mix waveforms by playing through channels at a fixed frequency. But the Amiga is a little bit different, I guess. I should say it's a little bit more... Maybe it's not unique because other systems were doing this, but it normally plays back PCM samples by either speeding them up or slowing them down to change the pitch.
Well, it's not only the samples, it does computer-generated waveforms that same way.
Yeah, so it'll do waveforms the same way. So in that sense, you could write a track that's purely wavetable synth. So even with the 4 channels and how simple that sounds, you could do so much with the hardware. And I think that's why me and you are so attracted to it, and a lot of people are too, because of what the composers could think about doing. You could really be creative with how you wrote your piece of music, and was almost no limit to what you could do. And experimenting and trying new things is what we saw a lot of the demo scene doing, and bringing that over to the Amiga and games published by other companies is kind of like a special point in this system's history.
Right. It's a gorgeous piece of hardware that seemed to be easy to use and had a lot of variety and gave you a lot of freedom. So it's no wonder that it had such great stuff.
So enough Hybris. Let's move over to the next game. And this was kind of the bulk of the episode. We wanted to kind of get into Battle Squadron as a solo episode, actually. And after hearing, Hybris and kind of thinking about it, was like, well, these really belong together. So
yeah, the 2 Copcom games, thought they were a good match.
Yeah, so a year after Hybris, in 1989, Copcom released, which is arguably one of the best vertical shooters on the Amiga, called Battle Squadron.
Yeah, the full title is Battle Squadron, The Destruction of the Barrax Empire. And this time it was published worldwide by Enterprise, and Electronic Zoo did the European release.
Right.
Battle Squadron took what made Hybris really good and expanded on it, and an example of this is the 2-player option.
Yeah, and the game takes place in the distant future in another solar system, so that's why they're kind of like distant cousins. They don't really follow, it's not like a direct sequel.
Right.
But there's this century-long war between the Earth Defense Fleet and the ruthless Barrax Empire.
And on their way back from a research and destroy mission, 2 Earth defense commanders are captured. And you, the player, are an elite fighter pilot who's sent out to rescue your comrades while eliminating any and all Barrax threats in your way.
Let's get into our first track. And it's going to kind of slow the pace down a little bit. This is a little bit slower track, but I think you guys are really going to enjoy it. This is the Hiscore music from Battle Squadron. Oh my God, so good.
Yeah, I actually needed a minute to recompose myself after listening to that. Anyway, that was Battle Squadron Hiscore music composed by Ron Klaren for the Amiga.
You have no idea how many episodes in the past I've wanted to just kind of sneak this track in.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, no, this is so great. We've been sitting on this for so long, and finally being able to play it and, you know, share it with everybody else is just feels so good. Such a great track, man.
Oh, I think this is like one of my favorite video game tracks ever. Like, I mean, it's just like there's so many great things about this. One of the cool things that I thought about this track was that this is Hiscore music, so I thought at the very beginning of this song it's very kind of sad sounding, like, oh, you died, like you're game over and now you're on the Hiscore screen or whatever, and then the drums kick in and it's like, oh, wait a minute, you were awesome, you're totally good enough for a high score. And
good job, buddy.
Yeah, I mean, so great.
Maybe it's because we talked about Top Gun earlier, but like I keep getting like Top Gun like flashbacks in my head when I'm hearing this now. Like,
well, it's that time frame with those drums. I love those like 90s drums. Like, I want to be in a band and just be the guy that does the choo-choo part. That's all I want to do.
Now, you know, this is one of those songs that I've had like on one of my old hard drives, and I've transferred with me like every new computer I've gotten over the years, and I love this soundtrack so much, like everything about it. Just the other day, I was like driving home. This is probably like last year, actually, not the other day. But I was driving home, and I had this song on, and it was like raining. You could barely see like cars in front of you, just the red lights, and just, man, the moment was right. Yeah, it just hit me. I was like, man, this is so good. It's like a perfect blend of like arpeggios. It's not overpowering. It doesn't like, you know, arpeggios are great, but when they're a little too bold, sometimes it can get a little menacing. But with this blend and this mix, I think it's just enough to just make you, just great feeling. Yeah, there was such a great balancing act between all the different, you know, the synth and the arpeggios and the pitch bending and the drums, and it was just such a great balance. I mean, and when we were listening to this before we started recording again, it was like we just let this thing loop for a while, and I mean, we were saying that like I could literally probably listen to this song all the time. Stop the show and just sit here and dork out for a while. Man, this is good. I mean, it was great this week. I was just listening to this soundtrack and this song over and over. I mean, there's not very many songs in this game, so this song popped up a lot, and I was like, oh my god, this is so good. I was at work, and I wanted to just crank up my speakers and be like, all of you out there, listen to this, and you're gonna love it. Like, and you know, I wanted to so bad. Well, let's take a cold shower and start getting into the gameplay a little bit. Otherwise, we're never going to get through the episode. Yeah. So the game supports both mouse and joystick controls for playing. And your ship has unlimited bullets, but it has limited Nova smart bombs. And like a lot of other shooters, you require weapons by killing enemies. And what's kind of interesting about the controls in this game is that if you have a joystick, if you have the Amiga joystick, you only have one button and the actual joystick itself. And so to be able to use these smart bombs, well, they had to be clever, and they had to think of how are we going to make it, because your buttons fire, and you only have that one button. So they're thinking like, how can we make it to where the player can do like a bomb? And so the technique for actually doing this is you hold down the fire button, and then you roll the joystick in like a circle, and that unleashes this smart bomb. I thought it was pretty clever. Yeah, that's kind of neat. Yeah, a good use of limited supplies. Right. So like a lot of other shooters, you acquire weapons by killing enemies, and these weapons have a ton of different upgrades. There's something like 25 in total. It's a ton. It's so hard to keep track of, but yeah, I mean, that's a surprising amount. Yeah. So some of these weapons, I actually had to look into the game manual because they didn't really explain it too well, and all these weapons have names, I guess. So I had no idea. I played this game growing up, and I don't remember any of these names. Yeah, and they're very specific. So we have the red magnetic torps. It's like torpedoes? Yeah, that's what I'm guessing. You have the green emerald laser, the two-way firing blue antimatter particle beam. Jeez. Yeah. And the sideways firing orange magma wave. And you also have item pickups like the Barrax jewel caches, which are worth like 1,000 points. You know, now that you say those names, I guess it kind of makes sense, because I recently played it again, and I can remember like the torpedoes, those red torpedoes and stuff. Okay, that I get it. I see where the correlation between the name is now. Makes sense. But you also have the option of adjusting the speed of the enemy bullets by basically changing the game's difficulty. So if you go into the options menu, you can scroll down and put it on easy, and the bullets will kind of fly slower. It makes the game a lot easier. It's a hard game. So super hard game. Yeah, so if you get kind of turned off by the difficulty level, you can adjust it and play that way and still enjoy it. Yeah, I mean, that's a neat way to make
different difficulties. So,
right.
And it totally makes sense. Like we mentioned in this game, the enemies are the Barrax Empire, and they actually come in a really large variety. You have things like gun turrets and launch platforms on the ground, and there's also other ground vehicles, and you have fighter ships and a bunch of really cool genetically engineered living weapons.
Yeah, there's a lot of really cool like enemies in this game. They vary all over the place too. You may be on like flying over a very organic area, and there's fighter jets coming at you, and then you go into this kind of machine factory looking area, and they're all like robotical like turrets and stuff. I think it was really cleverly designed.
Yeah, a lot of really good variety.
Yeah, some of the important specific enemies are cargo vehicles that drop upgrades after being destroyed. And these are how you upgrade your ship's weapons and get those different items and stuff. There's also a chain of, let's say there's a Barrax chain of like 4 different fighter jets coming at you. And if you shoot all of those in succession, then they drop basically a Nova bomb. So you get an extra bomb after shooting those. And there's really cool bosses like a gigantic robotic terror machine, giant environmental faces. Like I guess that's hard to explain. Just huge like organic faces. And there's also the Barrax Nova Cruiser.
Yeah, some really cool stuff. But let's actually talk about the composer, because I mean, he's really the highlight of this show. I mean, the music that is made for this game. So like we mentioned, the game is composed by Ron Klaren, aka Master Blaster, and he's a Dutch composer that did most of his music on the Amiga.
Yeah, like Beverly Hills Cop, Cyberblast, and The Plague, which already I mean, The Plague has amazing music, man. We got to do an episode on that too. Man, we're just getting way too ahead of ourselves. Every time we talk about one of these next games in succession, it's like, oh, we got to do a show on that.
I mean, we could literally do like a show like every day if we didn't have jobs.
Dude, let's quit our jobs. I don't think my family would like that much. Anyways, he was also part of a Dutch demo group called the Jungle Command.
And we also have Ivo Zoer, and he's listed in the credits as a musician, but I think he's probably did a little bit more sound driver work.
Ron Klaren actually had his own music format, and it's the music format for this game. It's like arcade dot, in game, and that's where you get his the tracker software that he used specific for this. And I think that Ivo Zoer actually was the responsible for creating that tracker software. I'm not 100% sure. There's not a whole lot of documentation on it, but I would assume that that's probably what he did. Yeah,
and he actually has a bunch of game credits to his name, but like I said, not as a composer, mostly as the director of engineering for games like Batman Arkham City, Fear 3, the Scribblenauts series.
Scribblenauts?
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I mean, we actually had the Scribblenauts composer on the show, which is neat.
That's crazy.
And then there's also like Lord of the Rings, War in the North, and Aragorn's Quest. So he's got, then the list went on and on.
I think that he's probably, maybe he's just doing freelance stuff.
Yeah.
Because it seems like he's bouncing all over the place. And I'm not quite sure what he's doing today. I couldn't really find a whole lot of information on him. But let's get into our next track. And this is from Battle Squadron. This is the victory track. It's short. It's like 30 seconds. But I figured we might as well get a chance to play it today. So let's check that, and we'll be right back.
You just heard the Battle Squadron victory music composed by Ron Klaren on the Amiga.
It's a pretty cool little track.
Yeah.
Short.
Yeah.
We looped it twice because it's only 14 seconds long, but
yeah, it kind of reminded me of like a Ninja Turtle dance party in the sewers.
Yeah, it's really bouncy, fun. Yeah. It's I guess you actually have to do good in this game to hear it, so not a lot of people will experience that.
You gotta win something.
Yeah, but let's go ahead and talk about the gameplay and the graphics a little bit, because like we were saying earlier, the game was probably one of the best shooters ever on the Amiga, and I think that a lot of people who played this game enjoy it. And this is one of the few titles that I actually experienced when back in the day. I think I was at a copy party or something. I got it, but it was a really great game.
Nice.
And I remember, and it stuck with me. And I think that the graphics in this game are just very well done. It's the same hardware. I mean, it's only a year later, but it adds a lot of new kind of sprite work and graphics into the mix.
Yeah, I think they took the very beautiful looking Hybris game and just kicked it up a notch. It's
big time.
Yeah, more detail, great sprites. Also, still has kind of big sprites. You can easily see what's going on. I think in this game they went with a color palette that had a lot more darks available to them, so you could get like these deep dark chasms, and everything had a little bit more refined shadows, which I think kind of popped it out, made it a little bit more three-dimensional looking, which that's what I was kind of missing from Hybris. It kind of gave it a little bit flat, simple look to it.
Right.
But
they probably learned from their I mean, I wouldn't say mistakes, but maybe a little bit of the shortcomings of Hybris. Now, I think Hybris is an excellent game.
Oh, yeah.
But I think, they did expand on it, and they really kind of tweaked all the small, minor, I guess you could say, imperfections, and definitely brought those bright, vibrant colors out.
Yeah, I mean, they had some really cool, complex things with, very naturalistic environments, and then they had very mechanically made things that had really cool perspective, and really cool machines in these tubes that were transparent. You could see enemies come. They weren't ready to be shot yet, but you could see them travel through the tubes and then pop out, and it's like, wow, that is really cool.
Yeah, it gets distracting because a lot of like the machinery and stuff is producing turrets on the ground, and you can see like the parts kind of coming together and it going through like the conveyor belt, and they pop out and they start shooting. You're like, oh, I was watching that.
Yeah,
but no, it's cool. There's something different about this game too. Hybris is like this vertical shooter, and it's just like this straight scrolling screen. But what Battle Squadron does differently is it allows a little bit of left and right movement. So the screen will actually slide to the left if you turn to the left and slide to the right. So you have a lot more. The level's actually a lot bigger than it looks. And adding 2 players in was cool because you guys could both fly together and kind of see different aspects of the scrolling level that you may have missed on your first run. I think that was kind of cool, and it made it a little bit more free. You weren't confined by the screen bounds. You could actually move outside. So if a bullet's coming down at you, you could keep going to the right or left and avoid it that way.
Yeah, and one of the really cool things that this game did was this really cool like predator like cloaking device to like some of the ships. You'd actually see like these little like weird distortions, and then there'd be like a ship pop up, and I was like, oh my god, did they just do that? I thought there was something going wrong, and then I was like, wow, that's really cool. So they really upped the complexity of this game, and I thought that was really cool. But like you said, it is super hard. This game is not easy at all.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, there's the interesting thing about this game is the way that the levels actually work, and when you're playing through. Let's kind of backtrack here. And you start up the game, and you're on this map, and you're moving forward, or you're moving up, I guess. And when you get through like a difficult part or like a major milestone in that level, there's these kind of chasms that you can fly into. They're like caves. It says like enter here or go in here or something. And you actually have to line up your ship directly on that spot.
Oh, okay. I was wondering.
Yeah, and if you're playing 2-player, both people have to do it or you miss it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's really, really hard to do. But when you get in there, then you go underground, and then that's where you actually fight like the boss of that level.
Oh, wow.
So if you miss that chasm, if you miss that entry point, then you have to go to the next one and fly in that way. And so once you go into the chasm and you defeat like the boss of that level, you go back out to the surface and you into that first scrolling area, and you have to go kind of do the thing again and find the next chasm. It's pretty cool.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't know that. I just thought those chasms were super awesome. I just kept imagining that there's like this bottomless pit, and I didn't know what was going to come out of there.
Yeah, no, it's a clever game, and the item upgrades and everything like that, it's very on par with Hybris or any other shooter. Just the overall gameplay and the amount of bullets on the screen and the difficulty level. I think for me personally, I like something that's very challenging like this, and it plays really well.
So talking about all these levels, let's actually get into the in-game music.
Sounds good.
So we have Battle Squadron in-game music, and we'll be right back.
another wild track. That was the in-game music composed by Ron Klaren for Battle Squadron on the Amiga.
Man, those drums are so heavy. It feels like I'm inside the drum.
That was like one of the things I wrote down. I was like, man, these drums are so powerful. Like, you're in this huge warehouse and it's like nothing but like 80 guys playing the drums at the same time, just exact hits. It's just, I don't know, it's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I also really liked about this track is that towards the end you hear different samples playing the same tunes, and so it's like switching off between different samples, but it's the same kind of like melody.
Right.
Like, wow, that's really cool to hear.
Like the echoing almost.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that was just really cool to see, like, you know, it was playing the same stuff, but then it's a different sample playing it this time. And
yeah.
Like, that was really neat.
That's cool. I mean, this track is, it's kind of got this victory feel.
That's what I was thinking too.
Yeah, it's got kind of like that 80s victory vibe. Just, I don't know. It's just a really powerful track. It's one that I have on repeat quite a lot as well, and can't get enough. Yeah,
I mean, it actually made me feel like I was an elite pilot, like you are in the game. So
yeah, are we going back to a Top Gun reference?
I don't know. Well, I mean, it's a flying game. So.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, but I think the game is really good overall. I enjoyed it. I know you.
Same here.
You had a good time, yeah. And so
the difficulty spike does not take away from the enjoyment of the game.
No, it just makes you. It's just like any other shooter in that sense, where it's like the more difficult, kind of the better. I mean, there is a threshold that's like, okay, this is over the top. But I think this hits a sweet spot where you can train yourself to get better, and you can practice, and you can, you know, the next time through you play, you're like, okay, this time I'm really going to focus on just the bullets, or I'm really going to focus on this area. And you can kind of look and not exactly memorize patterns, but you can memorize enemy location. Yeah. And that definitely helps, you know, playing it through a few times.
Yeah, because wherever you are on the screen, that's where they're going to shoot. So if you're not in the same spot, it's not going to be the same pattern. But
right.
Yeah, I mean, it's great. These games really do train you to have a lot of really quick movements. And I know for me, like, I kind of like zone out, like you do that like 1,000-yard stare. So I'm not actually looking at anything, so I can actually take in it all at once.
Right.
So it's actually fun. And when you make a really cool maneuver, it just makes you feel really awesome. Even if you get killed the next shot, it's just like, wow, I can't believe I slid through those 2 bullets. So
the game came out, it got really good reception. It was released also on the Genesis by Electronic Arts, and it was published in 1990. In the last 4 years, a publishing house called Seal of Action actually released it on Android, iOS, Amiga OS 4, Windows OS 10, and Morph OS. The reason why we didn't play the Genesis soundtrack is because it just doesn't.
Yeah, it didn't have the same feel. Like,
do you want to play a?
Yeah, I think at least for comparison.
Yeah, like 30 seconds. This is why don't we do the title theme?
Yeah.
The title theme for Battle Squadron on the Sega Genesis.
You can see why we chose the Amiga sound or the Genesis. So.
Right. This was interesting because it was composed by Ron Klaren. Obviously, it's the same track. We're hearing the same kind of thing, but Rob Hubbard actually did the conversion over to the Genesis, and Hubbard is a god among gods. You know, he's like the man. But this conversion just, I don't know, maybe he just didn't care that much.
Well, I mean, we love the Genesis too. So it just showed that the Amiga is it's the Amiga, man.
Yeah, I think the conversion too, it just didn't sound that good. I think that if it was like kind of redone, recomposed, maybe on the Genesis, it would be really cool with the FM synth. But yeah, it's just, it was kind of, it almost seems like an afterthought.
Yeah, that being said, both games actually got pretty good reviews. Most of them were in the 80s range out of 100, so that's pretty nice. I mean, Amiga Format gave it an 86% out of 100, so that's really good.
Yeah, I looked up Info Magazine, gave it like a 4.5 out of 5, not bad. And then Amiga Computing gave it 109%.
Yeah.
Don't really know how that works, but apparently they loved it.
Yeah.
But, you know, you look on like Lemon Amiga or some of these other sites, and you can see that this really hit home because like the comment section is like 250 different reviews on Battle Squadron, maybe a few less on Hybris, but people love these games and they remember them very well. And looking at some of these comments from people, they're like, oh my God, this was like my whole summer as a kid and I did nothing but play this game with my little brother or something. It's really cool. These games, even though not a lot of people played them here in the States, you know, there is this huge nostalgia around them and this huge fun factor, and people remember them as being just an excellent part of Amiga history.
For me, one of the big things I love about arcade games is shooters. I could see spending countless nights up until 2 or 3 in the morning playing the same game over and over and over.
Especially if me and you were like kids again, and we had like sleepovers, probably play 2-player mode all night long.
Yeah.
And why don't we set that up, man?
Yeah,
sleepover party.
That's what Extra Life was.
That's true, but you know, that just happened. I want to do it again.
Once a year is not enough.
That's true. So today we covered Hybris, composed by Paul Vandervalk, and Battle Squadron, composed by Ron Klaren for the Amiga.
And like always, if you want to know more about our show, you can check us out online at pixelatedaudio.com for show notes and track lists. We can also be found on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Pixelated Audio.
Yeah, and if you guys could leave some, feedback or rate us on iTunes, that's really appreciated, because we always like to see some kind of community feedback, and it gives us a good idea of how we can change up our show, or if we're doing something wrong, like we're not professionals. And so we just try to do what we think we would like. And it just kind of turns out that way. But we do want to give a quick shout out to Waskerly Way, which is Michael P. He wrote us a really nice review on the iTunes UK store. And so just want to say shout out to him. Thank you very much for the feedback. It's really awesome to hear, kind words coming from the other side of the world, and so we really appreciate it.
Yeah, we put a lot of hard work in the show, and we love to hear that people appreciate it, or they might have some suggestions on how to improve it.
Right, and also want to give a shout out to some of our peers like Ed and Mike over at Pixeltunes Radio, Brett at VG Empire. Great shows. I mean, there's definitely something to check out.
Because we can only put out 2 to 3 episodes a month, and there's plenty of other places to fill that void.
Right.
Speaking of episodes, if you're kind of new to our show, we have a ton of backlog of episodes. We have games like Grim Fandango, Restar, and Ghost in the Shell, just to name a few.
Right. And, speaking of Scribblenauts, we actually had the composer on of Scribblenauts for our Locke's Quest episode.
Right.
That was so much fun. It was really, really cool soundtrack. If you didn't play Locke's Quest on the DS, if you missed it, go back and listen to the music. Go listen to that episode, because it was a really fun one. It might get you pumped up to play it.
Yeah.
Anyways, the track taking us out is a remix by Dr.Future, and this is from Remix 64. The track is called Peace for My 64. It's a really mellow track. I think you guys are going to like it. Anyways, thank you guys again, and see you in a few weeks.